The forest had always been her sanctuary, though sanctuary implied safety, and Miria had long ago learned that safety was a myth whispered by those who'd never truly needed it. She moved through the ancient pines with a silence that belied her size, her 8-foot frame navigating between trees that had stood for centuries. The twilight hour painted everything in shades of purple and gray, the time when day creatures retreated and night hunters emerged. She belonged to neither world, suspended in the perpetual dusk of her existence. The smell of blood reached her first, not the coppery tang of deer or boar, but something older, richer, carrying with it an undercurrent of power that made her skin prickle with awareness. Mira paused, her hand instinctively moving to the hunting knife at her belt. In her 32 years of solitary existence, she'd learned to trust her instincts, and those instincts screamed at her now, though whether in warning or recognition, she couldn't say. She found him in a clearing where the moonlight pooled like liquid silver. His body sprawled across the moss-covered ground in a way that suggested he'd fallen from a great height, or been thrown. He was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often were, with features too perfect to be human, too sharp to be safe. Dark hair fell across a face gone pale even by vampire standards, and his clothing, though torn and blood-soaked, spoke of wealth and status, far beyond anything Mira had encountered in her isolated existence. 3 arrows protruded from his chest, their shafts carved with symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness. Silver-tipped and blessed, if she didn't miss her guess. Whoever had attacked him had known exactly what they were hunting. The smart thing would be to walk away. Mira had survived this long by keeping to herself, by avoiding the entanglements that came with caring about anyone or anything beyond her own continued existence. The villagers who'd driven her out after her husband's death had taught her that lesson well. Freak, they'd called her. Monster. Cursed. And those had been the kinder words, spat at her as they'd burned down the small cottage she and Thomas had built together, as they'd stolen the life she tried so desperately to build despite the accident of her birth. But the vampire's eyes opened as she stood there debating, and they were the color of blood-red rubies, filled with a pain so profound it resonated with something deep in her chest. He tried to speak, managed only a whisper that carried on the night air like smoke. Please. One word, one simple word, and Mira felt the last of her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. She knelt beside him, her large hands surprisingly gentle as she examined the wounds. The arrows had been placed with precision, one through the heart, 2 flanking it through the lungs. Whoever had shot him had wanted him to die slowly, painfully. The silver was already spreading poison through his system, turning his veins black beneath marble white skin. "This is going to hurt," she said, her voice rough from disuse. She hadn't spoken to another being in months. The vampire managed a sound that might have been a laugh. "More than it already does?" "Probably." Mira didn't believe in false comfort. She gripped the first arrow, the one through his heart, and pulled. The vampire's body went rigid, his back arching off the ground, but he made no sound. Impressive control, considering she could see the agony written in every line of his face. The arrow came free, with a wet sound that made even her stomach turn, and black blood welled up from the wound. The other 2 followed in quick succession. By the time she'd removed the third, the vampire had lost consciousness, which was probably a mercy. Mira tore strips from her own shirt. She had few enough clothes, but she'd need fewer still if she let him die here, and packed the wounds as best she could. The bleeding was slowing already, his supernatural healing beginning to work now that the silver was removed, but he was weak, dangerously so. She couldn't leave him here. She told herself it was pragmatism. Wounded vampire in the woods would attract attention, and attention was the last thing she wanted. But the truth sat heavy in her chest. A weight she thought she'd forgotten how to carry. She didn't want to be alone with another death. Couldn't bear to walk away from those ruby eyes and know she'd let them close forever. Mira gathered the vampire into her arms, marveling distantly at how light he seemed despite his height. She stood, adjusting his weight, and began the long walk back to her cabin. The moon watched their progress with silent judgment, and somewhere in the distance, wolves howled a warning she chose to ignore. Her home was less a cabin and more a shelter she'd cobbled together from necessity, built into the side of a hill with stone walls and a roof that only leaked when it rained hardest. But it was hers, bought with sweat and solitude, and it had kept her alive through 2 brutal winters. She laid the vampire on her bed, the only bed, and set about building up the fire. The night stretched long and uncertain. Miri sat vigil beside him, replacing the blood-soaked bandages, monitoring his breathing, his color, the slow but steady beat of his heart. She'd helped Thomas through fevers before he died, had nursed injured animals back to health in the lonely years since. But this felt different. The vampire's presence filled her small space with an energy she couldn't name, made the air feel charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. He woke near dawn, his eyes focusing with difficulty on her face. She watched weariness and confusion flicker across his features, followed by something that looked almost like wonder. "You're tall," he said, his voice still weak but clearer than before. Despite everything, Mira felt her lips twitch. Observant for someone who was dying a few hours ago. Was I? He tried to sit up, thought better of it, and settled back against the pillows. "I remember. Arrows, pain, your face in the moonlight." His eyes sharpened, focusing on her with an intensity that made her want to look away. "You saved me. I removed some arrows. Your own healing did the rest. Who are you?" "Nobody." The word came automatically, a truth she'd accepted long ago. "I live in these woods. I found you. That's all there is to it." The vampire studied her in silence for a long moment. "I'm Dorian," he said finally, "and you're far more than nobody, I think." Mira stood, uncomfortable with the way he looked at her, as if he could see past the carefully constructed walls of her isolation. "You need blood. I have deer meat, but I don't know if... Raw will do if you have it. I'm not particularly strong yet." He grimaced, clearly unhappy about admitting weakness. "The silver. It takes time to fully purge from my system." She brought him what she had, watched as he consumed it with a desperation that spoke to how close he'd been to true death. Color began to return to his face, the black veins fading slowly back to their normal pallor. When he'd finished, he leaned back against the wall, his expression thoughtful. "You know what I am," he said. It wasn't a question. "I've heard stories. Everyone has." Mira sat in the chair across from the bed, maintaining distance. "Vampires are supposed to be myth, though. Cautionary tales to keep children from wandering at night. We prefer it that way." easier to move unseen when the world thinks you're fiction. Dorian's eyes tracked her movements with predatory precision, though she sensed no threat in his gaze. Yet you saved me anyway. Why? Why indeed? Mira looked down at her hands, large and calloused from years of hard labor. Maybe I'm tired of letting things die. The simple honesty of her words hung in the air between them. Dorian said nothing for a long moment, and when she looked up, she found his expression had softened into something almost gentle. "Tell me your name," he said softly. "Please, I'd like to know the name of my savior." "Mira, my name is Mira." "Thank you, Mira, for my life." He paused, seeming to gather strength for what came next. "Those arrows, did you recognize the markings?" She shook her head. "I saw the symbols glowing. Some kind of magic, I assume." "Hunter magic. Very old, very powerful. The kind that takes years to master and considerable resources to employ." His jaw tightened. "They were sent specifically for me. Someone wants you dead. Many someones, I suspect." Dorian's laugh held no humor. "I'm not simply a vampire, Mira. I'm the Vampire King. Or was, until someone decided to dispute my claim in the most permanent way possible." The words should have frightened her, should have sent her fleeing into the woods, away from the political machinations of creatures she barely understood. Instead, Mira found herself leaning forward, drawn by the weight of history in his voice. "Tell me," she said. And he did. Through the remainder of the night and into the next day, Dorian spoke of a world that existed in the shadows of the one she knew, of vampire courts and ancient bloodlines, of power struggles that spanned centuries and blood feuds that predated recorded history. He told her of his ascension to the throne 50 years ago, barely an adult by vampire standards, thrust into leadership when his father was murdered by rivals. He spoke of the delicate balance he'd maintained, the alliances built and broken, the constant vigilance required to keep his people from descending into chaos. "I made enemies," he said quietly, watching firelight dance across the ceiling. "Every decision, every judgment, every execution, they add up over decades, creating shadows where assassins hide." He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. I knew it was coming, felt it in the shifting allegiances, heard it in the whispers that stopped when I entered a room. But knowing and preventing are different things entirely. "So what happens now?" Mira asked. "Do you return to your court? Hunt down whoever did this?" "I should." Dorian's eyes remained fixed on her face. "But I find myself reluctant. To face your would-be killers? To leave you alone in these woods?" The words settled between them like stones dropped into still water, rippling outward with implications Mira didn't want to examine. She stood abruptly, moving to stoke the fire, though it needed no stoking. "I've been alone for 5 years," she said, her back to him. "I'll manage. 5 years since your husband died." Mira spun to face him, anger flashing hot and sudden. "How? You wear a ring on a chain around your neck. You mentioned letting things die. And there's a grief in you, Mira, that speaks to profound loss." Dorian's voice remained gentle, lacking the judgment she'd steeled herself against. "I'm sorry. Whatever happened to him, I'm sorry." The anger drained away as quickly as it had come, leaving only the familiar hollow ache. Mary sank back into her chair, suddenly exhausted. "The villagers said I killed him. Said my size, my strength, that I'd crushed him in my sleep, like the monster I am." "Did you?" The directness of the question should have offended her. Instead, she found it oddly comforting. No dancing around the truth, no polite evasions. No, Thomas died of fever, same as anyone else might. But I am strong, stronger than any woman has a right to be. And they'd always feared me, whispered about me. When he died, she swallowed hard against the memories. They took their fear and grief and turned it into something sharp enough to drive me out. Burned our home. Would have burned me too if they'd caught me. So you came here. So I came here. Built a life that doesn't need anyone else. Doesn't hurt anyone else. Dorian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. I've lived over 300 years, Mira. I've seen empires rise and fall, watched humans build and destroy and build again. And in all that time, I've learned one inescapable truth. We are not meant to be alone. It goes against the very nature of our being, whether human or vampire or anything in between. Pretty words from someone who sits on a throne. A throne is the loneliest seat in any kingdom. He shifted on the bed, wincing slightly as his wounds pulled. I'm surrounded by subjects and courtiers and supplicants every moment of every night. Do you know how long it's been since anyone looked at me and saw simply me? Not the king, not the power I represent, not an opportunity to advance their own position. Mera met his eyes across the small space of her cabin. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you understand. Because in this small cabin, with you, a woman who owes me nothing and asks for nothing, I feel less alone than I have in decades. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because when I thought I was dying in that clearing, my last thought wasn't of my throne or my kingdom or my vengeance. It was regret that I'd never know what it felt like to be truly seen by someone. And then I found you, and then you found me. Dorian's smile was small, sad, and entirely genuine. Do you believe in fate, Mira? I believe in choice, she said firmly. I chose to help you. You chose to tell me your secrets. That's not fate. That's just two lonely people finding each other in the dark. Perhaps. But I'm choosing something else now. He pushed himself up to sitting, ignoring his body's protests. I'm choosing not to leave you alone again. The words hung in the air between them, heavy, with promise and possibility. Mira wanted to argue, to tell him he was being foolish, that he barely knew her, that they came from different worlds with different rules. But the hope that bloomed in her chest, fragile and fierce, stole the protests from her lips. You have a kingdom to return to, she said instead, the words almost a question. A kingdom that tried to kill me. Dorian's expression hardened. Oh, I'll deal with that. Make no mistake, but not yet. First I heal, and while I heal... He extended his hand across the space between bed and chair, palm up, an invitation. Let me stay. Let me know you. Let us both remember what it's like not to be alone. Mira stared at his outstretched hand. 5 years she'd spent in these woods. 5 years of self-imposed exile. 5 years of convincing herself that solitude was safety. And here was this vampire king, this impossible creature from a world she barely understood, offering her something she'd thought lost forever, connection. She reached out slowly, her large hand dwarfing his, and felt the cool press of his palm against hers. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm, a feeling she'd forgotten could exist between two people. 1 week, she said, her
voice, a sound that was both pure and heavy, like a prayer. When she finished, I couldn't say a word. And you know what? I saw the director stand up, tears falling into his hands. The very next day, I called the studio. They said, "No, it's impossible. She's a black singer. The audience won't accept it." I let out a cold laugh. I said, "If they don't accept it, then I'll take the responsibility." And I signed my name on the contract. June 1991, we started filming in Miami. On the first day, Whitney arrived 2 hours late. She lowered her head to apologize, her eyes red. I knew she had been crying. I didn't ask why. In the first scene, she had to do a kiss with me. She gave a nervous smile. "I've never done a kissing scene before," I said. "Then don't act." And when the camera rolled, she closed her eyes. A real kiss. No props, no retakes. When the director yelled, "Cut!" the entire set went silent. I could hear my heart beating. Something had just crossed beyond the screen. From that day on, the rumors started. The press took pictures of us having lunch, snapshots of me smiling at her. One paper even wrote, "Kevin Costner, Whitney Houston, real love on a fake screen." I stayed silent, but deep down I knew the truth is always more complicated than the rumors. One afternoon in July, we were filming a scene of her singing in an empty auditorium. That scene wasn't in the script. I just wanted to try something. I told the orchestra to turn off all the lights, leaving only a soft spotlight on her. She asked, "What do you want me to sing?" I said, "Sing the song you're most afraid of." She looked at me for a long time, then began to sing, "I Will Always Love You." Her voice cut through the air. She cried as she sang. I didn't stop the camera. I wanted the audience to see a woman saving her own soul. When she finished, she whispered, "I'm not sure I can make it through that scene again." I remember that night. She came knocking on my hotel room door at the Beverly Hills Hotel. It was drizzling. She stood on the porch, saying nothing. I simply opened the door and handed her a coat. She said, "I'm scared that when the lights go out, everyone will leave me." I replied, "If that ever happens, I'll be the last one to leave." She laughed, but there were tears behind it. And if you're watching this video, I want to ask you something. If you could save someone you love from their own pain, how would you do it? Would you tell the truth to wake them up or stay silent so they don't hurt more? Don't hesitate to share your thoughts. It's how you and I find meaning in every hour we live. In the months that followed, The Bodyguard became a storm. Box office hits, Grammys, people everywhere were singing her song. But inside, I saw her falling apart. Overlapping tour dates, addiction, toxic relationships. In 1993, when I visited her in New York, her eyes looked different. The light was still there, but behind it was a dark wall. I asked, "Are you okay?" She smiled. "Did you?"
Consideration, even family, especially family, becomes a web of potential betrayal and ambition. He turned to look at her, his red eyes reflecting firelight. "With you, there's none of that. You don't want my throne. Don't care about vampire politics. Have no agenda beyond surviving in these woods. Do you know what a gift that is?" Mira felt heat rise in her cheeks, unused to being described as anyone's gift. "I'm just extraordinary," Doyen interrupted firmly. "You're extraordinary, Mira. Your strength, your resilience, your stubborn determination to survive despite everything the world has thrown at you. The way you move through these woods like you're part of them. The gentleness in your hands despite their size. The way you saved a dying stranger and asked for nothing in return." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "You're not a monster or a freak or any of the other horrible things they called you. You're magnificent." Tears pricked at Mira's eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She'd taught herself not to cry, had learned that tears were a weakness she couldn't afford. But Dorian's words, spoken with such quiet conviction, breached defenses she'd thought impenetrable. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "How to let someone in again." "Neither do I," Dorian admitted. "It's been so long since I let anyone see past the crown to the person beneath." "We can figure it out together, if you're willing." Mira looked at their joined hands, her large and weathered, his pale and elegant, yet somehow fitting together, like pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known was incomplete. The week she'd promised him was nearly over, and the thought of him leaving, of returning to the solitude she'd convinced herself she wanted, made her chest ache with an intensity that frightened her. "Stay," she said, the word barely audible. Then stronger. "Stay longer. However long you need to heal. However long before you have to face whatever's waiting for you in your kingdom. Stay." Dorian's expression transformed, hope and relief, and something deeper warring across his features. "Are you certain?" "Once I stay, once I let myself truly know you, Mira, I won't be able to walk away. I won't leave you alone in these woods again, not without a fight." "Maybe I don't want to be alone anymore," she said, the admission feeling like stepping off a cliff into unknown darkness. "Maybe I'm tired of being safe." He raised their joined hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with old-world courtesy. "Then I stay, for as long as you'll have me." The days turned into weeks, and weeks into something that felt dangerously close to forever. Dorian's wounds healed completely, his strength returning until he moved with the fluid grace of a predator at full power. But he showed no inclination to leave, and Mira found herself grateful for his continued presence in ways that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. They fell into new patterns, adapting to each other's rhythms with surprising ease. Dorian hunted at night, bringing back game that Mira could prepare and preserve. He helped her repair the cabin's roof, his vampire strength making quick work of tasks that would have taken her days. In return, she showed him the hidden places in the forest, the clearings where deer came to drink, the ancient trees that offered shelter from summer storms, the cave systems that wound deep into the earth. "I forget sometimes," Dorian said one night as they sat on the cabin's small porch watching stars wheel overhead, "that the world can be this simple, this peaceful." "Do you miss it?" Mira asked. "Your court? Your throne?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I miss the purpose of it, the feeling of guiding my people, of making decisions that matter. But the politics, the constant vigilance, the loneliness." He shook his head. "No, I don't miss that at all." "You'll have to go back eventually," Mira said, voicing the fear that had been growing in her heart. "Deal with whoever tried to kill you. Reclaim your throne." "Eventually," Dorian agreed, "but not yet. Not until I know you're safe." "Safe from what?" "From being alone. From believing that isolation is your only option." He turned to face her fully. "I want you to come with me when I return, Mira. Not to stay. I wouldn't ask that of you. Not unless you wanted it. But to see that there are places in this world where being different isn't a curse. My court isn't like a human village. We're creatures of the night, monsters by your people's standards. Among us, your size and strength would be admired, not feared." The offer hung between them, tempting and terrifying. Mira imagined leaving these woods, stepping into the unknown world Dorian had described. The thought made her stomach clench with anxiety. I don't know if I can, she said honestly. This place, it's all I've had for so long. It's a cage, Mira. A beautiful, safe cage, but a cage nonetheless. Dorian's voice was gentle but firm. You've survived here. But are you truly living? Or just existing, waiting for time to pass until there's nothing left but memory and regret? The words stung because they were true. Mira had been existing, had chosen existence over life because life meant risk, and risk meant potential loss. But these weeks with Dorian had reminded her what living felt like. The exhilaration and terror of letting someone matter, of allowing herself to care despite knowing it could hurt. I'm afraid, she admitted, of caring too much, of losing you the way I lost Thomas, of opening my heart only to have it shattered again. Dorian reached out, cupping her face with both his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. I'm afraid too, afraid that someone will try again, to kill me and succeed. Afraid that I'll fail you somehow, fail to protect you from a world that's been cruel. Afraid that this us is too fragile to survive outside these woods. He leaned forward until their foreheads touched. But I'd rather be afraid together than safe and alone. Wouldn't you? Mira closed her eyes, feeling the coolness of his skin against hers, breathing in the scent of him, night air and old forests and something uniquely his own. She thought of Thomas, of their brief time together, and realized he would have wanted this for her, would have wanted her to live, to love again, to be brave enough to risk her heart one more time. Yes, she whispered, I'd rather be afraid with you. The kiss, when it came, was nothing like she'd expected. Dorian's lips were cool against hers, gentle but insistent, speaking of decades of loneliness and desire and desperate hope. Mira responded instinctively, her arms coming up to wrap around him, pulling him close despite the height difference. He made a sound low in his throat, something between a groan and a sigh, and deepened the kiss until Mira felt dizzy with want. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, though only one of them needed breath, Dorian rested his forehead against her shoulder. I've wanted to do that for weeks, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Every time you smiled, every time you laughed, every moment I watched you move through this world with such unconscious grace. I wanted to kiss you and never stop. Mira laughed shakily, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. Why didn't you? Because you needed time. Because I wanted you to be sure. He pulled back to look at her, his red eyes intense in the darkness. Are you sure, Mira? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. I meant what I said. I won't leave you alone. Not now, not ever. Whether you come with me to my court or stay here in these woods, I'll be by your side. That's not a promise I make lightly. Neither is this, Mira said, and kissed him again. They moved inside as the night deepened, their touches growing bolder, but never losing the tenderness that had characterized their relationship from the start. Dorian mapped every inch of her skin with his hands and lips, worshipping her body in a way that made Mira feel cherished rather than judged. He traced the scars on her arms from years of hard labor, kissed the rough calluses on her palms, ran his fingers through her long dark hair with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes. Beautiful, he murmured against her skin. So beautiful. And for the first time in her life, Mira believed it. They lay tangled together afterward, Mira's head resting on Dorian's chest, listening to the slow, steady beat of his heart. She'd never felt more content, more at peace, than she did in this moment. Tell me about your court, she said quietly. Really tell me. What would it be like if I came with you? Dorian's hand stroked slowly through her hair as he spoke. Overwhelming at first, I imagine. My castle sits in a mountain valley, hidden by magic and geography from human eyes. It's vast, hundreds of rooms, libraries that would take decades to fully explore, ballrooms and gardens and secret passages built over centuries. My people are varied. Some are old as me or older. Others are relatively young, vampires, who've only lived a century or two. We have our own culture, our own customs and rules. Would they accept me? The question that had been weighing on her heart. Some would. Dorian's honesty was both appreciated and painful. Others would see you as a curiosity, a human brought to court by their king. There would be politics, attempts to use you to gain favor or influence. It wouldn't be easy. But you think I should come anyway? I think, Dorian said carefully, that the choice should be yours. If you want to stay here, I'll stay with you. We'll build a life in these woods, away from courts and politics and all the complications that come with my throne. If you want to come with me, I'll protect you with everything I am, and I'll show you wonders you've never imagined. Either way, we're together. That's what matters to me. Mary was quiet for a long time, thinking. The cabin had been her refuge, her fortress against a cruel world. But it had also been her prison. The wall she'd built to keep pain out had also kept life at bay. Dorian was offering her a chance to live again. Really live in a world that might be dangerous but would never be boring. What about whoever tried to kill you? She asked. Won't returning put you in danger? Staying here puts us both in danger, Dorian said grimly. My enemies will eventually wonder why my body was never found. They'll send hunters to confirm my death. And when they find me here, with you. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Then we need to face them. Take back your throne. Deal with your enemies. Mira pushed herself up on one elbow to look down at him. And I'm coming with you. Not because I think I'll fit into your world, I probably won't, but because I'm tired of running, tired of hiding, and because I love you. The words hung in the air between them, naked and vulnerable. Mira hadn't planned to say them, hadn't realized they were true until they left her lips. But there they were, honest and irrevocable. Dorian's expression transformed, wonder and joy and fierce devotion flickering across his features. He pulled her down into a kiss that left no doubt about his feelings. I love you, he said against her lips. I love your strength and your kindness and your stubborn determination to survive. I love the way you move, the way you think, the way you see the world. I love you, Mira, with everything I've learned about love in 3 centuries of existence. They held each other as dawn approached, making plans and promises and preparations. Dorian would need to contact his most trusted advisors, determine who remained loyal and who had betrayed him. They would need weapons, allies, a strategy for reclaiming his throne without triggering a civil war among the vampires. It would be dangerous, possibly deadly. But as Mira lay in Dorian's arms, watching the first light of dawn paint the cabin's walls gold, she felt no fear, only a fierce determination to protect what they'd found together, and an excitement for the future that she hadn't felt since Thomas died. No more being alone, she said softly. No more being alone, Dorian agreed, holding her closer. Never again. The next few weeks passed in a flurry of preparation. Dorian reached out through old channels, contacting vampires he trusted with coded messages and careful inquiries. Slowly, a picture emerged of what had happened in his absence. His second in command, a vampire named Cassius, who'd served his father before him, had declared Dorian dead and moved to assume the throne. Some of the court had supported him, either because they believed the lie or because they saw an opportunity for advancement. Others had resisted, creating factions and tensions that threatened to tear the vampire kingdom apart. Civil war, Dorian said grimly, reading the latest report. Cassius has always been ambitious, but I never thought he'd go this far, to actually try to kill me. People do terrible things for power, Mira observed. She was sharpening her hunting knives, preparing for the confrontation she knew was coming. The question is, what do we do about it? We return, publicly, dramatically, and with enough force that no one questions my right to rule. Dorian looked up at her, his expression serious. But Mira, when we do this, when we walk into my court together, everything changes. You'll be marked as mine, under my protection, but also a target for my enemies. Are you truly ready for that? Mary set down her knife and crossed to where he sat. She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. I've spent 5 years hiding from the world. 5 years playing it safe. It didn't make me happy. It just made me numb. You've reminded me what it feels like to be alive, to have something worth fighting for. I'm not going to lose you, because I'm afraid of what might happen. You're remarkable, Dorian said softly. Have I mentioned that? Once or twice? Mira smiled. But I don't mind hearing it again. Their allies began arriving a few days later. Vampires loyal to Dorian who'd been operating in secret, waiting for a sign that the king lived. They were a diverse group representing different factions and bloodlines within vampire society, united only by their loyalty to Dorian and their opposition to Cassius's coup. They were also, Mira realized quickly, utterly fascinated by her. A human, one of them, a female vampire named Elena, with silver hair and knowing eyes, said with barely concealed curiosity, "You've taken up with a human, Your Majesty. That's unprecedented." Mira is far more than a simple human, Dorian said, his tone brooking no argument. She saved my life and has become essential to it. Anyone who wishes to remain in my service will treat her with the respect she deserves. Elena's eyes flicked between them, a slow smile spreading across her face. I see. Well then, welcome to the madness, Mira. If you've won our king's heart, you must be something special indeed. The other vampires followed Elena's lead, accepting Mira's presence if not fully understanding it. She participated in their strategy sessions, offered insights from her outsider's perspective, and slowly earned their respect through her straightforward manner and clear devotion to Dorian. The plan they developed was audacious in its simplicity. Rather than attempting to sneak into the castle or build support slowly, they would announce Dorian's return with unmistakable force. A gathering of the court would be called, ostensibly to formalize Cassius's claim to the throne. And into that gathering would walk Dorian, very much alive, with Mira at his side and his loyal followers at his back. It's theatrical, admitted Marcus, a tactical genius who'd been planning military campaigns for 2 centuries. But theater matters in vampire politics. Show them you're strong, that you're not afraid, and half your enemies will fold before a drop of blood is shed. And the other half? Mira asked. Marcus's smile was sharp as knives. We'll be ready for them. The night they left the cabin, Mira took a last long look at the place that had been her home for 5 years. It looked smaller now, less like a sanctuary, and more like what Dorian had called it, a cage. She'd survived here, but she hadn't lived. Not really. The real living had started the night she'd found a dying vampire in the woods and made the choice to save him rather than walk away. Any regrets? Dorian asked, coming to stand beside her. None, Mara said firmly. This place served its purpose. Now it's time for something new. They traveled through the night, a small group moving with supernatural speed through forests and over mountains. Mira rode with Dorian, held secure in his arms as he moved with the fluid grace of his kind. The world blurred around them, but she felt no fear. How could she, when she was held by someone who'd sworn never to let her fall? The castle appeared near dawn, a massive structure of dark stone and older magic rising from the mountainside like something from a dream. Lights burned in hundreds of windows, and even from a distance, Mira could sense the power that thrummed through its walls. Impressive, she said softly. It's been my home for over 200 years, Dorian replied. And now, if you'll have it, it will be yours as well. They approached from the old servants' entrance, a route few remembered and fewer still could access without permission. Marcus led the way, disabling magical wards and security measures with practiced efficiency. By the time they reached the great hall where the court had assembled, Dorian's followers had taken up strategic positions throughout the castle. The great hall was exactly as spectacular as Mira had imagined, with vaulted ceilings that disappeared into shadow, and walls lined with tapestries depicting centuries of vampire history. Hundreds of vampires filled the space, all dressed in finery that made Mira's simple traveling clothes feel woefully inadequate. At the far end, seated on an ornate throne, was Cassius, a handsome vampire with dark hair and cold eyes, wearing a crown that didn't belong to him. The crowd noticed Dorian first, conversations dying away as heads turned toward the entrance. Shock and disbelief rippled through the assembly, followed quickly by fear from some quarters and fierce joy from others. But it was Mira who drew the most attention. Her height, putting her above most of the crowd, even without the slight elevation of the entrance steps, her hand clasped firmly in Dorian's. Cassius rose slowly from the throne, his face gone pale even by vampire standards. Impossible, he whispered, though the word carried in the sudden silence. You're dead. The hunters confirmed it. The hunters failed, Dorian said, his voice ringing with authority that had been honed over centuries of rule. As have you, Cassius? Did you truly think I wouldn't discover your betrayal? That I wouldn't return to claim what is mine? You were dying, Cassius's composure cracked, revealing desperation beneath. 3 silver arrows through the heart. No one survives that. I waited to be sure before moving to protect our people from the chaos your death would cause. You sent those hunters, Dorian accused, each word sharp as a blade. You orchestrated my assassination so you could steal my throne. Don't compound your crimes with lies. The court erupted into chaos, accusations and counter-accusations flying, old alliances fracturing, new ones forming in the span of heartbeats. Cassius's supporters moved to defend him, while Dorian's loyalists closed ranks. Violence hung in the air, thick and tangible, waiting for the first spark to ignite it. Mira felt Dorian tense beside her, preparing for a battle that would drench the hall in blood. But before he could move, before anyone could strike the first blow, she stepped forward. "Stop," she said. And though she didn't raise her voice, something in her tone cut through the chaos. Perhaps it was her height, commanding attention simply by virtue of standing head and shoulders above most vampires. Perhaps it was the novelty of a human daring to speak in vampire court. Or perhaps it was simply the authority that came from someone who'd survived loss and exile and come out the other side stronger for it. Whatever the reason, the hall fell silent. "You're about to tear yourselves apart," Mira continued, addressing the entire assembly. "Over what? A throne? Power? Pride?" She looked at Cassius, then at Dorian. "I'm a nobody, just a human woman who happened to find your king dying in the woods. I don't understand your politics or your ancient feuds, but I understand this. Dorian is worth following, not because of his throne or his crown or his centuries of rule, because of who he is, honorable, wise, willing to put his people above his own comfort." She turned to face Cassius directly. "You wanted his throne badly enough to try to murder him for it. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of leader you'd make. A true king doesn't need to kill to claim his crown. He earns it through service and sacrifice, and the loyalty of those who choose to follow him." Cassius's face twisted with rage. "You dare lecture me, human? You're nothing. A curiosity. A pet the king has taken a fancy to. You have no place here. No right to speak in matters that don't concern you." "She has every right," Dorian said, his voice cold as winter frost, "because she is mine, and I am hers. Anyone who questions her place questions me." The challenge hung in the air. Cassius had two choices: back down or fight. His hand moved to the sword at his hip, and Mira saw his decision written across his face. What happened next occurred so quickly that human eyes would have struggled to track it. Cassius drew his blade and lunged, not at Dorian, but at Mira, gambling that attacking the king's human would break Dorian's composure, create an opening. It was clever, ruthless, and would have worked against a normal human. But Mira was not, and had never been, normal. She sidestepped the blade with reflexes honed by years of hunting in dangerous woods, caught Cassius's wrist, and used his own momentum to slam him face first into the marble floor. The sword clattered away, and Mira planted her knee in the center of Cassius's back, holding him immobile with strength that made several vampires gasp in surprise. "I am not a pet," she said quietly, leaning close to Cassius's ear. "And I'm not weak. Remember that." She released him and stepped back, moving to stand beside Dorian once more. The hall erupted into noise again, but this time it was different. Excited conversation, grudging respect, even a few laughs at Cassius's expense. Dorian looked at her with such profound love and admiration that Mira felt her cheeks heat. That, he said softly, for her ears alone, was magnificent. The rest of the confrontation was almost anticlimactic. Cassius, humiliated and outmaneuvered, had no choice but to yield. His supporters melted away, unwilling to fight for a cause that had so thoroughly collapsed. Dorian reclaimed his throne not through violence but through the sheer force of his rightful authority and the unexpected strength of the woman at his side. In the days that followed, life in the castle settled into a new rhythm. Dorian worked to repair the damage Cassius's coup had caused, rebuilding trust and reinforcing alliances. Mira found her own place in this strange new world, not as a decoration or a curiosity, but as someone with genuine value to offer. Her outsider's perspective proved useful in resolving disputes. Her strength earned respect from warriors, and her relationship with Dorian gave her a position of influence she wielded carefully but effectively. She missed the woods sometimes, missed the simplicity of her cabin and the peace of solitude. But she didn't miss being alone. Not when she had Dorian by her side, when she had purpose and connection and a future that stretched before her bright with possibility. "Do you regret it?" Dorian asked one night as they stood on a balcony overlooking the valley. "Leaving your cabin, coming to this complicated world of ours?" Mira considered the question seriously, as she did all things. "I regret that I needed 5 years of exile to learn what you taught me in 5 weeks. That safety isn't the same as happiness. That being alone might protect you from hurt, but it also protects you from joy." She turned to face him, taking his hands in hers. "You saved me, Dorian, just as surely as I saved you in those woods. You reminded me how to live, how to love, how to be brave enough to risk my heart again." "We saved each other," Dorian corrected gently. "You gave me back myself, the person I was before the crown, before the politics, before I forgot what it meant to simply be with someone who saw me for me. You gave me a reason to fight for my throne beyond duty or obligation. You gave me hope." They stood together in the darkness, two beings who should never have met. A vampire king and a human outcast brought together by chance and kept together by choice. Below them, the castle teemed with life and politics, and all the complications that came with power. Above them, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the dramas of those below. "No more being alone," Mera said, echoing the promise they'd made weeks ago in a small cabin that seemed a lifetime away. "Never again," Dorian agreed, pulling her close. "For as long as we both shall live, however long that may be, we face it together." And in that promise, in that fierce devotion, Mira finally found what she'd been searching for all along. Not safety or solitude, not isolation from a world that had been cruel, but connection, love, and the courage to believe that she deserved both. The vampire king and his giant widow stood together in the darkness, and for the first time in longer than either could remember, neither of them felt alone.